So what we're here to talk about is escape from North America. Not that we want to escape from North America, but if you don't come from North America, or if you do and you plan to deploy systems outside North America, then you're going to have to get involved with either localizing or internationalizing your Asterisk, depending on how you look at it. And for everybody that's worked with Asterisk for any period of time, you immediately realize that Asterisk is born in the USA, don't you? Because everything's pretty US-centric, from the number plan examples through to the tones and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is have a little chat, and I want this to be as interactive and as friendly as possible. We're all buddies here. You know, there's only a few of us. We can just ask questions when they come to mind. You can make comments. You know, if you've got experience of this, then chip in. It's a community kind of deal here. So we're going to talk about localizing your Asterisk implementations. So really the three key things that we're going to talk about are, number one, what we might need or want to change when we deploy our Asterisk in a different part of the world. Number two, where do we actually go to change that? Because, of course, some things that we want to change are actually definitely going to be part of Asterisk's configuration, whereas others might be in peripheral things like IP phones, for example. And then, how can we change it? Because it would be no good if we talked about what and where without doing the how, would it? That would be a complete waste of time. Actually, I think just before we carry on, we just need to do a quick personality test. I haven't done one of these for a while now. I didn't do one in last year's Astricon, so do you mind if I just do that, Steve? Okay, so this personality test just enables us to get to know each other just a little bit better in the room. Can you just clasp your hands together like that in front of you for a moment? Just for a moment, and you'll instantly notice that one of your thumbs is closer to your face than the other. Okay, so who's got the left thumb closest? Just raise your hands. Have a good look round at me, everybody, because these are the sexy people in the room. Have a good look round. Okay. Okay, now who had the right thumb? Who was that? Have a good look at these people, because they think they're the sexy people in the room. Okay. But fortunately, the talk does apply to both. So I'll carry on there. That's just to help us get to know each other just slightly more. Okay, so what might we want to change? Well, of course, the very, very obvious one is the language prompt, isn't it? If we're ringing up and leaving a voicemail or whatever it might be, people are going to want to hear that in their local language. It's going to alienate them if they hear it in a different language. And in fact, not even in a different language. If they hear it in a different accent, it could alienate them. You know, if an English guy rings up a system and he hears some Scottish person telling him to leave a message, that could be the outbreak of war right there. So we need to be able to change that. Caller ID is another one. And that's a bit of a gotcha, isn't it, caller ID? Because how many different variations are there of caller ID transmission around PSTN networks around the world? That's the answer I was looking for. So we're not going to put a number on it, but it's going to catch you out, isn't it? It's going to bite you if you're not careful. I once spent 3 hours, actually, in an English installation, trying to fiddle with Asterisk to get the caller ID going. And then I said to the owner of the business, I said, do you have caller ID? He said, no, we never pay for it. That was a learning point right there. Then there's the tones, of course, because the tones actually are almost as, well, probably more important than the language, because those tones are a language in themselves, aren't they? You know, the confidence tone that you've got a dial tone there. If you don't hear the one that you're used to, you might think something weird is happening. And of course, it's not just the generation of the tones, it's the recognition. You know, if you're connecting Asterisk to the PSTN just on an analog line, and the other end is busy, you'd like to know that. You need to recognize that kind of stuff. Then there's the telephony interfaces, because not all of those are created equal. Pretty much, most places you go in the world is going to be a twisted pair. We know that, isn't it? But what's going to be on the twisted pair is kind of a different thing from place to place. Anybody care to give me the voltages used in the good old US of A on your analog twisted pair here? Or is that going to vary from state to state, or CLEC to CLEC, or whatever? So there's going to be two voltages we're looking for. One of them is the voltage that powers the telephone, right? So is that about 60 volts here in the US? 50 volts? 40 volts? 30 volts? 40 volts? 48. Okay, that's actually in common with the UK, that one. There you go, Alistair. Have yourself a little chocolate. Yes, that's right. Depending on which way you connect round, you'll be right there. And actually, that's why your telephone, your analog telephone, works in a power outage, isn't it? Because it's line powered. And it reminds me actually of once we had a very, very expensive I'm going slightly off topic here, just for a moment. We had a very, very expensive vacuum cleaner demonstration in our house once. And this vacuum cleaner, I think it was about $1,000, and it had like a big old light on the front. And the guy was demonstrating it, and my wife said to him, what's it got that big old light on the front? I said, He said, that's in case there's a power outage so you can carry on in the dark. And she went, oh, okay. And then he winked at me, and I winked at him, and we carried on. Anyway, back to the story. So the electrical stuff that you get off the telephone line, both the resting voltage, what we might call the battery voltage to drive the phone, and the ringing voltage, is going to be different from place to place. And of course, your analog cards, your digium cards in this case, are going to need to reflect that. And then there's the times and dates. So can anybody tell me where times and dates are going to be important to us on a telephone system? Voicemail data. Perfect answer. I can only think of one other place, actually, where times and dates might be important to us. Go ahead, sir. Time of day routing. That's kind of local time, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, because I'm a generous kind of dude. Sorry? CDRs is what I was thinking there. Exactly, there you go. Take your little pen. Was there an answer over here somewhere? On the outside. I'm giving away too many chocolates, but...
No, I'm full, thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead here. That's right, we don't... That's a very nice one. That's just all chocolate, but don't worry, it's not Hershey. This is real English stuff we're talking about here. Okay, so these are the things that we might need to change. So let's start with the tones. So if we're connecting up analog phones, that is the de facto standard picture in the digium world of an analog phone right there. That one's an IP phone, that one's an analog phone. That's the way it works. If we're connecting up an analog phone and we pick up the handset and we listen, we're going to get a dial tone, aren't we? And where's that dial tone coming from? It's coming from the switch, isn't it? Let's get that guy. This one's a chewy one, sir. There you go. And that's coming from the switch. Whether the switch is your Asterisk or the telephone provider, the local CO, whatever it is, it's got to have it from there. So, thinking about that, therefore we have to change, it'll be the DARDI configuration in this case, wouldn't it, to change the dial tone on the actual analog phone. But how about an IP phone? When I pick up the handset on an IP phone and I get my dial tone, where's that coming from? Exactly, that tells you virtually nothing, does it, other than that curly chord works. That's just about it. And of course, when people are coming from the world of analog telephony to VoIP, that kind of catches them out sometimes. In fact, certain phones, you can configure them to only provide that dial tone when they're successfully registered to a server, which actually makes it a little bit more realistic compared to what we're used to. So, the IP phones, we're going to have to configure tones in there, and then we're still talking about the outside. We're going to have to configure DARDI to go with the tones for the analog phones. So, there we go. Tones for IP devices are going to be in SIP, in whichever IP devices, whether it's an EEX, because you can get an EEX phone, right? You can get a SIP phone, or whether it's an ATA, an analog telephone adapter. All of those are actually going to be in the devices themselves. Then we've got tones on the analog channels. That will be the responsibility of the framework we're using to connect outside, in this case DARDI. And then we've got internal tones. So if Mark calls me, and I decide that I want to call Derek, okay, and I'm going to put Mark on hold to call Derek, then we're inside Asterisk now, aren't we? So that's a different thing to the first two tones that we talked about. So let's have a look where we're going to do these. Well, if it's the device, do it on the device. There's no good fiddling around in Asterisk, thinking, yeah, I've heard there's a file called indications.conf. I think I'll just go in there and mess around. It's not going to work, is it? We're going to have to go into the individual devices themselves, whether it's the ATA or the IP phone. The tone for the analog channels, that's all going to happen in etc system.conf. Now, if you're running anything older than 1.4.25 or thereabouts, if you're in the Zaptel framework, the old Zaptel framework, it's going to be etc zaptel.conf. Okay, but in today's modern currency, it's etc DARDI system.conf. And remember that DARDI is kind of divorced from Asterisk in a way. We're talking about having that card work in the wonderful world of Linux. And then we use something called chandardi.conf, which we'll be coming to later, to feed out the tones. And there's two things we're particularly interested in, the load zone directive and the default zone. Load zone lets us load up the tones for the zone that we're in, and we can load multiple tones. So we could load zone US, UK, DE, IT, FR, ES, all those different countries. But we're going to have to default to one of them, and that's going to be our standard. So when people pick up the analog phone, they're going to get those kind of tones. However, we can change it on the fly and play different tones if we need to. Now, the tones internal to Asterisk. Remember the example of Mark phones me, I'm going to put him on hold. and then pass the call out to Derek. So Mark's going to hear a tone from inside Asterisk. That is configured inside indications.conf. And would anybody like to tell us just how simple that is to do? What do we need to change inside indications.conf? Oh, I'm going to give you a chocolate for ingenuity there. I forgot it was up there, actually. Pretty much when you open that file, the very first thing you're going to notice is country equals. There's quite a lot in there, and if you scroll down, you'll see there's actually descriptions for each country. So you can see the different things that we're talking about. But you just change the country, and you're away there. Not forgetting, of course, to reload everything. Otherwise, it's not going to take. OK, so you might be thinking, well, whereabouts does this stuff hang out in my average Linux system? So this is taken from CentOS here. And there's root's home directory delineated there with a little tilde. But if we go into etc asterisk, we can find indications.conf just there. And if we go into etc dardy, that's where we're going to find the system.conf file to do that load zone and default zone stuff. So you have no excuses now. You can go in and change all of those different bits and pieces. Any questions so far? Yes, go ahead, Alistair. It's an excellent question. I can give you a very short answer. No, I don't know. I don't know of a good resource to do that. But certainly, I come from the ISDN world, and we'd be constantly asked that question. You know, Outer Mongolia would be on the phone saying, "Can you support our CAS-based protocol?" We call it yabba yabba, whatever, and we'd get them to send us a trace, and it invariably looked like something else we're already dealing with. So I totally understand the question, but I'm not aware. Are you aware of any resource for that kind of thing? Yeah, well, fair enough. Is anybody else aware of that kind of thing? So when you get a little country like Liechtenstein, does it look like Belgium for its tones? Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a great question. I tell you what I'm going to do is I know that you're full, but I'm going to give you a chocolate to reallocate to somebody at some stage, okay? It's chocolate distribution by proxy here. Okay. Right. Okay, so the time and date is an important thing to change, especially around voicemail. And the time and date is set in Linux. So Asterisk uses the system time for all its dealings. And Asterisk can be made aware of many time zones. And these zones are not just talking about the actual time zones, but we can get down into detail about the way that times and dates are spoken. For instance, over here in the US, there seems to be a preponderance to say September 30th. But over in Europe, we tend to say the 30th of September. And Asterisk can handle all this right down to the way you pronounce a 0. Is it 0 or is it an O?